Hello everyone, welcome back to Marian's World. And no moth today because I've been busy doing something else, and that something else was starting to put the birds together into the wall hanging. I've had to split this up into two different videos because there's quite a lot of hand sewing and the whole thing is getting done by hand. There's not going to be any machining at all. So you're going to see the first part today, and because that was quite a small video in the end, I've actually given you a little sneak peek of the garden as well, because I ventured out this morning to see what it was like, because I haven't been out there for so long. And yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess, but there are signs of spring, and so I've included those little signs of spring. There's probably going to be more gardening coming up later on in the year. So I'll leave you with the birds, and I will see you afterwards. I hope you enjoy it. I've got all the birds laid out on the dining table, ready to put together. And I must admit, it's been quite difficult to decide what to do. My original plan was to patchwork them together using some sashing, and I did think that the linen from my coat would have worked, but it just didn't look right to me. And patchwork them together and then sew them with a wadding, quilt them, get them ready to hang. But the more I've thought about it, the less I want to do that. And plus, none of the materials I've got have seemed like sufficient to be the sashing. So I did have some beautiful dark blue, but I don't have anywhere near enough to make the sashing for them all. And so I've come up with an entirely different plan. Here I've got the size of my page, which is 6 by 8. What I'm going to do is I will be taking each bird and I will iron it around the card so I get an absolutely precise size for them all. What I've also done is cut out pieces of wadding. This is just left over from other quilts that I've done years ago. And then each bird will be, the wadding will be put inside each bird's page, like that. Obviously once it's all cut back and ironed properly. And then I'm going to applique them onto this backing. Now the backing is actually an old tablecloth, and I only just have enough, but it is wide enough. So I've got I do have the hem on this side, but not on that side. So that's the order I'm putting them in, and I definitely don't want a white or a cream in between them. So I'm going to Inktense them up. I'm going to take all these off now. I'm going to lay out the wadding pieces, and I will leave them on in their order, and then I'm going to get my Inktense. I'm going to cover my table with some plastic, and I'm going to paint up where I know the in-between parts will be, so that I have my own custom, well, it'll look like sashing, but it won't really be, because there'll be applique on. See the layout better now, because those pieces of wadding are the exact size of each page, and the space at the top will be where I can embroider just something that says the Garden Birds of 2023 or something like that. I'm not quite sure yet, but a little title. And as you can see here, I have only just got the right width to put them all on. But now that they're like that, I'm going to get my Inktense and I'm going to paint all the in-between pieces. I've now got the polythene sheet that I usually put down when I'm doing acrylic painting. I put it to cover my table and my floor, because quite often I'm doing acrylic pour, and so I cover everything up. So I've got that underneath. I've got my Inktense blocks, and I think I'm going to have to make up quite a bit of the paint. So I've got just my plain water and the biggest brush I've got without going to get a wall painting brush. And I feel as if I really do know the sort of colours I want, because I did have a beautiful midnight blue shirt of my husband's, and it was just the perfect colour for the birds, but I just don't have enough. So I am going to sort of almost colour wash this through. I'm mixing up this sort of a blue first. I think I'll water the fabric in between. I'm leaving these on because I don't need to paint underneath and I don't want to waste my paints. So I'm just going to make sure that it flows underneath where I want it to be and keep a soft edge all the time. I'll put this one on. I think that'll be just the perfect colour. I think I might just mix it up on the cloth. It just means that I can change the colour as I want as I go through the wall hanging. So I can put a bit more of this blue here. I do feel I'm going to stick with the blues all the way. It's going to be very wet in the end, but that's okay. That's why I've got the polythene there. The shirt was so perfect, but there wouldn't have even been enough left to sash 4 of them. And then I had nothing else similar. I really do like this very dark blue. I'm going to make sure that's coming through. It did have quite a nice green, but I don't know, it wasn't giving me anything. It just didn't look like I was imagining it was going to be. As remember, originally these were going to be pages and they'd have all been separated. I'm happy for the variation. I think I want that to be quite dark. And I'll make sure the water's there, I won't get the hard edge. But you get the idea. To do this type of thing, you just need to make sure your fabric is already really wet, and then the colour will just flow from your brush in such a lovely way. Just thought this old tablecloth had such a good amount of body to it. Well, I did have another beautiful one. It was very fine and I just couldn't imagine it holding up to having the birds appliqued onto them. We definitely will dry lighter once they're dry. And if they're too light, I'll just go over and I'll paint them again. Well, I'll come back when I've got a bit more done, because otherwise it's likely to be a boring video. Just me painting cloth. I've just got the last of it done, I think, and I'm quite pleased with how it's looking at the moment. I've got variation in the colour. I won't know exactly till it's dried, but I think that'll make a good background. It might just be a little bit on the bright side. What I think I'll do is just put my paints down a minute. If I take all these off now, I don't need them on anymore. You can see how I've saved my Inktense by not having to paint the whole thing. And what I can do, I can run a bit more water, a bit more colour into here if I think they need it, but actually I don't think I do. Maybe I'll just thicken some of these up a bit so that I know that when I stitch down I'm not going to see any white, although I can touch it up afterwards anyway. I'm using my cardboard foam to make sure that all the birds end up being the same size. So usually I can sort of remember where I need to go to, but some of them haven't been the most accurate in size. But once I've got the cardboard in the right place, I can just iron, and then I hold that down and check the top to make sure I've got it accurate without pulling it. I'm happy that that's at the bottom of there. I just need to pull that over, make sure I'm square really. The blue lines you can see are where I've used my disappearing pen to mark the edge of the pages. I don't need to really get that off as long as I'm folding it in. And then make sure I've got it centred where I want it to be. Maybe a bit further over that way. And then I can iron those sides in too. And in this way I'll make sure that all of my pages end up being the same size. Oh, that's how that finished one looks. I'll take my cardboard out and I can check it with my piece of wadding that I'm going to put in behind them. Should just lie in there, fold back over, and when I applique them down it'll give them a bit of body. Well, I might have to cut them a tiny bit smaller because they're going inside the page. I'll do the little sparrow next. I definitely won't waste any of the cut-offs off this fabric. It's beautiful. The more accurate the ironed now, the easier it'll be for me when I'm putting it on. Just keep enough there. That's too nice to spend its life on the back of that. There we go. That gets kept. I'll do the same with this side. I turn around and have a look. Just needs the tackings to come out. Yep. I'm going to continue doing all of them. There's 14 altogether. That's lovely. I'm over the moon with that. I'm here back in the dining room with the dry cloth which has been ironed and all my birds which are now ironed to the correct size. And I'm a bit concerned that maybe the colour is too bright, but I'm going to set them out and just see what it looks like, because from this I'll know whether I can just go ahead and pin them on or not. So I still need measuring out before I can stitch them down, and I'll start with the centre one and I'll work outwards. It's not too bright. I think it's going to work perfectly because I'm intending to, I've got 3 choices. I can either hem stitch round them, I can running stitch right round the very edge, or I can blanket stitch them on. The blanket stitch would definitely be more decorative, and I could use the same colour thread for every one, which would be harmonious. The running stitch also, I'd use the same thread. Actually, I think I'm just going to hem them on, because if I hem stitch them on, especially when they have their little padding underneath, I think that'll look the best. and then when I put this front with its backing, I can hand stitch through to quilt the backing and the front together. And these may just need a little bit of a trim so that the outer thing has room to go around it. But I think that'll make them stand out nicely. So I'm going to hem them on with just normal sewing thread, but I will get this one pinned and then I can work out the spacings on all the others from that. Leaves me this clear space at the top to do like a title page type of a thing. I'm not quite sure what it will be yet, but that's what I'm intending. But I think I'm really pleased on the layout. First thing now is to bring the pins in, pin this one at least, and start to do some stitching. I think I'm so pleased now that I didn't have any material that was just the right colour, because this varies, but it's bringing life to the whole rest of it, I think. I'm set up to start sewing the first of the birds onto the backing fabric, and what I've done is I've just cut a couple of millimetres off each side of this padding, just to enable the fabric to fold in without a problem, because I felt it was just a little bit too tight, and so the little couple of millimetres off is going to do the trick. And the first one I'm putting on is the blue tit. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut back the excess fabric, so I don't need it all on at all. So I want to lessen the bulk where I can. And now that it's all ironed in, I can cut this off. And also what I'll be doing is I'll be pulling the corner in on a diagonal and then folding the sides in on their crease. And then that'll make a really nice fold there, but it won't be seen at all. It just makes that on the front I won't have any folds showing on either the side or the top. So that's how they're going to go in. And I'm going to put a couple of pins in, just so I know it's going to stay nice and square. It's definitely going to look nice on this background, I think. I know there are lots of reasons why there's lots of times where you don't really have to take any care as to how big or how little your stitches are and whether they're visible or not. And I do that myself. Sometimes it's just not, but sometimes it is worth trying to make a beautiful seam or a beautiful stitch, and this is definitely one of them for me. I definitely want this little hem stitch to be almost invisible. I'm going to hold, it'll be difficult to show you because the thread is so near. I'm going to hold the folded over edge onto my background. I'm going to come in, there's my thread coming away here. I'm going to go straight over onto the back, because that's the way to get the tiniest stitch. Now, if this was a hem stitch on a piece of clothing that you're going to see the back of, I wouldn't be going all the way through that. I'd just pick up the tiniest bit. But because this is what it is, I can go right through the back, and I'm going to hop along about 1/4 of an inch. Not even that, less than 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to pick up a couple of threads on the back of my blue tit. I'll see if I can show you that. So it literally is a few threads, and if I pull that through, that little stitch is just going to melt into the background. And so straight down, I'm not going away from it at all. I know that's an exaggeration, but I'm not going away from here. I'm not slipping forward. If I slipped forward, that would be a slip stitch, and that's for a different reason. Again, you could definitely hem on that, but I'm trying to do a proper hem stitch, which is going to be as invisible as I can make it. So wherever the thread has come out, I go straight down onto the background, and I'm going to just come forward by, I don't know, 4 millimeters, and just pick up the tiniest few threads and pull through. And it doesn't take very long either. You get into the rhythm of the stitch. If it was any more difficult, I'd definitely have my thimble on, but at the moment I'm on 2 really good fabrics that are sewing nicely, and so I don't feel as if I need my thimble. The main thing is that I'm not coming up into the fabric here where there's going to be a big stitch. I'm coming just the last thread on the fold and pulling it through. You need a nice sharp needle for this. It's got a small eye. I don't want to be making any big holes in my fabric or anything. You can take the pin out and carry along. And I know that's going to be almost invisible. And so I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to do that along the whole outer edge, well, of all of them, but I'm on the bluted at the moment. And I do love this type of a hand sew, I really do. Something very satisfying. It might not be a slow stitch in that sense of the word, but it's not particularly, you know, it's not fast like the machine, and there's a satisfying rhythm to making the stitches, but there's also a pleasure in doing the stitches as beautifully as I can, and knowing that when I look at it at the end, nothing will jump out at me, nothing will jar. They'll just be sewn down as nicely as I can. I'm holding the fabric flat as I can as well. The fabric's not held over my finger, because then the 2 fabrics would be slipping. I've got my finger underneath holding that flat. Take the pin out of the way. And make sure the corner is all beautiful. I think by sewing them this way, instead of doing it like a patchwork and putting sashing and doing it on the machine, I think this will give the birds an actual bit of a raised up effect, which is I think what I'm liking, what I think I like. I've just put a securing stitch in there by going twice in the same thing, so that means I can just put my needle there while I make sure what the fabric's doing, and there we are. That's sewn down now, and it's almost invisible. I've got a feeling the bird wall hanging is going to be done in a couple of parts, because there's going to be too much hand sewing to get done all in one go, I think. and you definitely don't want to just watch me hand sewing for I don't know how many hours. I'll see how far I get over the next couple of days, and then maybe in a couple of weeks' time I'll be able to do a part 2 when they're all sewn on. So this was the first thing I learned to do when I was a child. But it would be making a hem on a piece of cloth. And I sort of never got tired of doing it, really. I think I'm quite happy to sew like this. I'm coming along the bottom of the milk bottle now, and I thought I'd show you again how I'm doing it, because the thread will show up on the white better. But it's even more important to just take the tiniest piece of thread. And so you can see there that I'm going straight down and coming along a few millimeters, and then just taking the very last thread or so on the fold before I pull it through. And even though this is a beige thread on the white, once it's all done together, that's hardly going to be noticeable. And when I hold it up, you can just see the little pinches that I've made here. But when you see the stitching as a whole, it won't be noticeable at all. You really can notice that I've got the padding underneath. And because I'm short of material at this bottom left corner, I thought the way I'll put them on is I'll come down to this one and I'll measure it out. I'm going to measure an inch gap between them, and I'll do an inch on the sides as well, I think. And I'll work my way from this middle one out to the side, so because this corner is where I'm the shortest on material. So I'm doing that one next, and I'll work my way out, and it's just more of the same, hemming them on and hoping that they look nice when they're on. As you can see, I've cut them all stitched down and I'm over the moon. I'll bring you down so I can show you properly. They've all gone in really nicely. They've got a 1 inch gap in between, and the only ones that I didn't put the wadding underneath were the starling here, which, remember, he has a bit of cardboard in him to stretch the puckers out. So I didn't need to do it there. Put a little bit top and bottom to pad out where the cardboard wasn't, but he hasn't got anything. And the other one that didn't need anything underneath was the owl, because this monogamied paper was very thick, and also there's another layer of material and then the powder puff, so actually they didn't need it either. You might notice that I changed the eyes on that owl because I was never really very happy with them. And then when they got next to the little owl chicks, they just didn't look right at all. And so I've gone ahead and changed his eyes. It's very rare that I take some stitching back, but it definitely needed to be done. So they're all on, which was quite an undertaking, but I'm very pleased. And so it left me thinking, what do I do next? So what I need to do is put a wadding in underneath, and I don't have anything big enough, but I do have an old blanket, so I'm going to use an old blanket in the middle. And then I have had almost all my fabric out to find a backing, and nothing was working for me, nothing at all. I think I quite would have liked black maybe, but when I put a bit of black fabric that I did have, that didn't look quite right either. And so I've maybe got a surprising choice. I've got a bit of purple. and I think it's actually the same tone as what I've painted, the blue, and I'm going to try it. So I'm going to cut my blanket, cut the backing, I'm going to quilt through in these gaps to quilt it together. Once I've got the quilting done and I start to put the edging forward, if I don't like it after all, I will make myself some bias tape out of some different fabric, and I will put that on as a separate, like putting on a bias binding. But I'll definitely use this purple as the backing because I think that'll be nice. So that is where I'm going to have to leave it for this week. I haven't actually got a space to hang them on the wall yet, and nor have I worked out how I'm hanging them up. Oh, maybe I have. Maybe I've decided. I can't actually remember. I've got a couple of ideas. So that's the birds being left there. I'll leave you with as good a view as I can. Come out into the garden because it's actually not a bad day today, but just look at it, it's in a big mess. But I came out to see and look for signs of life, and they're there. The hellebore, and I can see snowdrops and aconites. I'll go and have a look for them. Surprisingly, there's signs of primroses. Can't believe the primrose is coming out. This was more what I was expecting. Winter aconites. Beautiful yellow on a ruff of green. They're nearly always the first in my garden, along with the snowdrops. And here they are, snowdrops pushing up through the undergrowth. There's no signs of the buds on the trees breaking. I do love the lichen on the branch of this lilac. It's very pretty. More snowdrops coming out. But there's no buds breaking on the dogwood yet. My goodness, here's a surprise. The honeysuckle has burst its buds. Well, I know purple might not have been what you'd expect me to put as the binding round the edge of the birds, but I'm reserving my judgment until I've got it quilted with the backing, and I'll see what I feel about it. It is the same tone as the blue, so it may work well, but I'll just wait until I've got that all quilted up. So that might be a couple of weeks' time. In the meantime, what else have I been doing? Well, the tree is coming along beautifully, and I'm going to try and show you what the trunk looks like because I'm really pleased with it. It's got just a homemade mixture of PVA glue with soggy loo paper and talcum powder and a bit of polyfiller, that's in like wall filler, all mixed together with a bit of acrylic paint until I made a mixture that I thought was going to work, and it's gone solid. It's really hard, and I've covered the branches and I've painted it up, and it's still got these funny bits here because that's how I'm going to attach it to my landscape, I think. So I'm making a little landscape that'll fit on my mantelpiece in the sitting room, and so there will be going to be leaves on it, but I'm not quite at that stage yet. I just keep putting little bits in as I go, and in between all the other things that I'm doing I just keep, or I'll put another layer on and see what happens. So the tree's coming along really nicely and I'm pleased with the shape. It's flat at the back because it's going to sit on my mantelpiece against the wall, and so that's purposeful to do it like that. So that's that. But the best thing is I've actually started my knitting. I've been waiting to start this for so long. I cast on the other day and I have got this much done. Oh, I've dropped my wool. I've got this much done, so I'm in the round, and this is the Yell cardigan by Marie Wallen, and you can just see the colour work coming on there now. and it's Fair Isle, and there's no stranding because I don't strand. And so I expect to see a knitting video within the next week or two, because as soon as I've got some of this properly going, and I'll do a little mock-up maybe with some other paler wool that's easier to explain it with, because this is very muted, and so I feel maybe if I have a bigger needle, because these are just 3¼ are these 3¼ or 3½? I think these are 3¼ millimeters. So I think a bigger needle and a thicker wool will enable me to explain the no stranding. But I'm looking forward to that because I have wanted to cast this cardigan on for absolute months and I've just never got around to it. But it's on the needles, and so by the time you see that again, hopefully it'll be a bit bigger, because once I get going I'm quite a quick knitter, and so I'm hoping it's not going to take me that long. Although I enjoy it. I'm not trying to rush through it or anything. I'm just a quick knitter because I've been knitting for like nearly 60 years. I think I was about 7 actually when I learned to knit. Yeah, 6 or 7. Considering I'm going to be 65, it's quite a long time. No wonder I've picked up a bit of speed, but I've also picked up some good tips as well. And so there's a good cast on to show you, which I did a little reel of on Instagram, but I'll be able to explain that better in a longer video, and also the way that I knit the Fair Isle. So I'm excited to film that actually. That would be different, trying to film the knitting up close. So next week it might be knitting, or it might be a moth again and then the knitting. I'm not quite sure. I keep trying to work it out and give myself a schedule, but in the end it doesn't sort of work out because I get sidetracked all the time. And I will see you next time with another episode of the Stitch Journal. Anyway, happy stitching, happy knitting, happy tree making, happy crafting, whatever you're doing. I'll see you next time. Bye from Marian's World.